界人たちよ、黒源だ。魔を撃て。さもなければ永遠の夜は明けることあたわず。人と魔の境界にてこのアプリリスが忌まわしき夜の始まりを告げん。
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Briareos Kerensky and welcome to the review of IX Monstrum Nox, the latest chapter in the long-running action series by Nihon Falcom and the first developed from the ground up for the PS4. Not only that, but Monstrum Nox is one of the most ambitious games Falcom developed in recent years, refining several mechanics found in previous titles while adding a good numbers of new features. The result is a very complex and very enjoyable game that will please all his fans, but also one of the less polished games in the series, with several minor technical hiccups. IX is set in the city of Balduk, the prison city, and Adol finds himself in the city's gaol almost the moment the game begins. He quickly escapes, dyeing his hair black to avoid recapture, meeting up with Doggy in an abandoned house and repurposing it as a pub, the Dandelion. Adol's problems don't stop here, as the mysterious Aprilis forcibly enlists him and 5 other individuals to fight the nightmarish creatures of the grim world encroaching the city, unbeknownst to the general citizens. To do so, the 6, who will all end up being playable characters, are given the ability to transform into quote-unquote monsters, gaining amazing fighting skills and special abilities. Adol and the monstrous versions of the other party members are wanted in Balduk, but this is nothing more than a narrative device. You won't need to be conspicuous about running around town or using otherworldly abilities in the open, even right in front of guards. The story as a whole is not overly complex, and by the end all plot points are neatly tied up and resolved. It is cliched and somewhat lacking in focus, however, with some of the secondary characters and late-game plot twists popping out of seemingly nowhere and being there just because they had to be there, rather than contributing meaningfully to the overall plot. Progression is brisk with no overly long cutscenes, and there are more dialogue selections than before, although they won't change the course of the story. Like Lacrimosa of Dana, Monstrum Nox has a parallel storyline, this time featuring a second Adol, and his existence ties directly into the main plot. His sections aren't as elaborate as Dana's were, unfortunately. Character-specific secondary quests have been toned down in length as well. But there is a scene towards the end of the game that will surprise even long-time fans.
なるほどな。あれが冒険家アドル・クリスティンか。
At its core, Monstrum Nox follows the same structure of IX-8. Full 3D camera, 3 types of damage, fast move and guard, 4 special and 1 extra skill, party of 3 active members that can be swapped on the fly. Items that give the party special abilities are still present, but greatly reduced in use. The extra skill meter now empties if you are not in combat, and must be filled by attacking enemies, meaning you can't fill it at the start of a dungeon and keep it for the boss. Energy walls limit the party's ability to access the various neighborhoods of Balduk, and to open them the party has to collect enough Nox points to make a gate appear, beat the monsters inside, and continue with the adventure. Nox points are gathered by completing main and side quests, and as usual everything is neatly indicated on the map, with plenty of teleport points around the city. What set IX apart from previous games are the gifts each party member has. Unfortunately, it's impossible to talk about the game's strengths and weaknesses without revealing what these abilities are, so consider this a minor spoiler. And Japanese trailers do show these abilities in action. I'll try to keep things as vague as possible anyway. Once a character joins the party, his or her gift becomes available to everyone, no need to swap people in and out. Adol gets a grappling hook, called Crimson Line, and with it he can reach distant locations with ease and instantly. The line can also be used to close distances with enemies, although the range in this case is severely limited. Shironeko gives the party the ability to scale almost every vertical surface by simply running into them, while Hawk adds a glide ability. The other three gifts are more geared towards solving the very basic puzzles that dot the dungeons and are criminally underused. In particular, the Shadow Dive is a glorified crouch button. Dol's ability shows a lot of promise at first, being used to track footsteps and reveal boss weaknesses, but after that is just used to show hidden buttons that you need to use to progress. Raging Bull's ability is to smash things, pretty straightforward, and does find a very small usage in combat against the handful of enemies, maybe 3, with a guard action. Characters are introduced one by one and given one chapter each, allowing players to learn their abilities and backstory. That chapter's quests and dungeons are centered around the characters' abilities, and the dungeons in particular are among the most elaborate designs in the series. The first true dungeon makes an excellent use of Adol's and Shironeko's gifts, expanding both horizontally and vertically, creating a truly marvelous labyrinth to grow through, with plenty of tricky spots and treasures to reach to let players understand what the limitations of these two gifts are. All the dungeons have their own peculiar trick, but after Hawk and Adol join the party, their design becomes less elaborate, with rooms or puzzles requiring the use of one specific ability to clear them. The final dungeon does put your mastery of all gifts to the test, especially if you want to reach all treasure chests, but the middle of the game is full of well-designed dungeons that aren't as peculiar as what came before or what will come next. Boss design, both visually and mechanically, is great. Visually, bosses are a perfect fit for the nightmarish and monstrous setting of IX, with a design and color palette unlike everything else. Some of the later bosses are a bit less visually unique, but still follow a very tight style seen throughout the game. Standard enemies range from the strange creatures of the Grim World to more standard critters found in the outskirts of Balduc. Combat hasn't received much of an overhaul, although Adol and friends will face many more enemies at once, and those enemies can be as large as bosses, resulting in much more chaotic engagements where characters might end completely hidden by enemies. The barriers blocking Adol's way in Balduc must be dispelled by completing wave missions similar to those in Ys 8. These missions have been expanded in scope, now divided in two types. The first type follows the normal party versus wave structure, but with all 6 playable characters acting independently to bring down monsters. You can still swap between party members in the active slots. In the second type you need to destroy red crystals scattered around the map within the time limit, while enemies try to stop you. These missions mix combat, exploration and use of monstrous gifts and sound great in theory, but obscuring enemies, frantic combat, wall climbing that might not work immediately, and a time limit make some of the later fights clunky to go through. Doggy will still improve defenses if you bring him the right materials. The second Adol has his own set of dungeons to explore filled with exclusive enemies, but no special abilities or attacks to fight them with, just a rusty sword and the usual dodge. Some of these enemies are invincible, and at times must be exploited to solve some simple environmental puzzles, from reaching a treasure chest to opening the path forward. These dungeons also feature a large number of traps, a lot of them causing one-hit deaths. Most of them can be avoided by paying attention to the surroundings, but others spring out of nowhere leaving little or no time to react. Dungeons have plenty of checkpoints, so you don't need to retread too much old ground, but more visible hints, even if very subtle, would have gone a long way in making these segments more enjoyable. It's just that dying from something you had no chance of knowing was there is not fun. The city of Balduk is huge, I think larger than the island of Seiren from Ys 8, and the gifts make traversing the blocks incredibly fun. Spotting a grapple point while running around at street level, zip to it, then quickly climb along walls to get a vantage point from which you can glide across waterways or reach a hidden place with one of the many collectibles the city is filled with is immensely satisfying, and it's easy to see how much effort Falcom spent designing this playground. Party members automatically switch to their monstrous form when using abilities, and the residents will react with surprise when spotting them. The city of Balduk itself feels like a proper city, with roads and buildings just the right size when strolling on ground level, and varied enough when zipping across rooftops as monsters. As long as you don't enter sub-locations, there are no loading times in Balduk. The city streams almost effortlessly whatever action you take. Getting into shops and then back out does result in somewhat long loading times, however, and when going around you will notice model and texture pop-ups, as well as frame rate drops. None of these are enough to ruin the exploration, but I think the engine is a tweaked version of Ys 8 relying too much on the PS4's brute force rather than optimization. The ability to scale walls at times is very inconsistent, refusing to let players climb unless perfectly perpendicular with the surface, and slight camera movements can make characters lose grip. At times it's unclear if a wall feature is blocking you because it's really impassable or just a glitch. Again, these issues are far from being enough to bring the exploration mechanics down, but it's also the first time such glaring errors are in a recent Ys game. I've also incurred in severe stuttering during a particular mission, and there I feared the game would crash, but luckily it never happened. Once Adol was stuck in an animation frame, unable to do anything, he then recovered by himself. Still on the technical side, at times Ys 9 does scale back resolution and or anti-aliasing trying to keep frame rate constant like Lacrimosa of Dana did on the Switch, but in Monstrum Nox it's nowhere near as aggressive as it was on Nintendo's Hybrid. But let me reiterate this, I very much prefer Falcom trying something new rather than simply stick with a proven formula, glitches or no glitches, and nothing here is downright broken, just not as polished as you'd expect from Falcom. Monstrum Nox looks better than any other Ys before thanks to the new hardware, although it's not a huge step up from Lacrimosa of Dana. Texture work is absolutely marvelous, especially on some characters, and colored lights, either direct or environmental, are used to set the mood for cutscenes and dungeons. Objects do cast shadows, but they can be extremely pixelated. Better than nothing, I suppose. The game runs at a constant 60 FPS in all battle scenarios, even when facing enemies in the city, as drawing distance and some effects are cut as long as the battle rages. The voice cast is solid, although a bit unremarkable in performance. I think Monstrum Nox features more voiceovers than Ys 8 or Tokyo Xanadu, but you still get cutscenes where some characters have a voice while others don't. Music is as you would expect from Falcom. A varied mix of tracks performed with all kinds of instruments, most noticeably electric guitars to give the exploration the right background tune no matter the location. I know I've listed a lot of problems, but don't get me wrong. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is very far from being a bad game. While it simply builds on the foundations laid by Lacrimosa of Dana, themselves an improvement over older mechanics, it adds a series of new abilities to keep things fresh, and these give Ys 9 its own distinct feel. That said, I do consider Monstrum Nox inferior to Lacrimosa of Dana, not by much, mostly thanks to the imposing atmosphere and the sense of wonder you got from exploring Seiren. I like the castaways in that game more than the various personalities of Balduk 2. But again, Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is a highly recommended game that will please pretty much everyone. Movement options are the real highlights, which make the simple act of going around the city of Balduk a lot of fun, and this 9 is one of those games you play with a smile from beginning to end. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you'll stick around for more. Briareos Kerensky, over and out.
よくやってくれたみな。感謝する。